Hey guys, this is the MMA Exchange. Let's break down UFC Fight Night Cannonier versus Borralho.
The MMA Exchange.
Alright guys, opening up the prelims, we have Wang Cong, who's 5-0, versus Victoria Leonardo, who's 9-6. Wang is an undefeated prospect coming out of China. She has an MMA record of 5-0 and a kickboxing record of 8 wins, 0 losses, and 1 no contest. She's coming off a first round mounted guillotine in the road to UFC. What's impressive about her is even though she has an extensive kickboxing record, she has 2 submissions on her MMA record. From her MMA wins, it shows us that she has a really nasty head kick and she has the ability to snatch up submissions. There's really not much to say about her negatively because she's only 5-0 in MMA. But she has a really good kickboxing background, has the ability to snatch up submissions. So if her takedown defense is really good, she should be a well-rounded fighter. Then we have her opponent, Victoria Leonardo. She's 9-6 and she's coming off a KO loss against Natalia Silva. Before this, she won against Mandy Bomb, who's 7-1, which is good. But her losses include Melissa Gatto, Erin Blanchfield by head kick in round 2, Miranda Maverick twice, which was once by submission and once by decision. And also on her record, she has a split decision loss in kickboxing, where Victoria has shown her weaknesses and shown us where she is very susceptible to. I think Wang does really well in terms of submissions, being able to go for the finish. And for that reason, I have her winning. Next, guys, we have Nathan Fletcher, who's 9-2, coming out of England, versus Zygimantas Ramaska, who's 8-1. Let's look at Nathan first. He's predominantly a grappler with really good submission skills. His main submission that he goes for is the rear naked choke. And as soon as he gets his opponent to the ground, he's always looking for the submission. His 2 losses came from his opponents being able to stuff his takedowns and keep it on the feet. And through that, we're able to see his holes and weaknesses in his game, which is his striking defense. He doesn't adapt well to adversity, but the main pro of his skill set is a really good grappling game. We then go on to his opponent, Zygimantas. He is the complete opposite. He is a striker with a really strong Muay Thai background. His main way of winning is TKO/knockout, and he has really, really nasty leg kicks. He can manage distance well, and his only loss was to a grappler that negated his striking by being able to take him down. Both have faced opponents with a very similar experience. Their opponents aren't really UFC level, but enough to where they can continue building on their skill set. If Fletcher can close the distance and, work the clinch and then work it into sweeps or takedowns, most likely we'll see Fletcher win. Obviously, Zygimantas wants to keep the fight standing. And if I do have to make a pick in this fight, because we've only seen one time Zygimantas getting taken down and getting smothered and not being able to strike, compared to Fletcher, where we've seen him lose twice to the same kind of style, it shows that if you're losing more than once to the same kind of style, you have to really train hard and understand, look, my striking isn't good, let me improve more on my grappling, or let me improve more on my striking defense. Because he's lost twice to the same kind of opponent, I'd have to go with Zygimantas in this one. Next, guys, on the card, we have Josiane Nunes, who's 10-2, versus Jacqueline Cavalcanti, who is 6-1. Now, the loss that Jacqueline has on her record is because her opponent was able to pressure her. Jacqueline, or Jacqueline, however you pronounce her name, does really well because her opponents let her put the pace on. You have Josiane Nunes, who she is a power puncher and puts the pressure on her opponents. How did we see Jacqueline lose in her only loss in her career? Was because her opponent did not give in to her pressure. She pressured the pressure striker, if that makes sense. Josiane Nunes is that kind of fighter, and I don't see Jacqueline being able to handle the power of Nunes. I'm actually going Nunes by knockout. Next on the card, guys, we have Viacheslav Borshchev versus James Llontop. Now, if we're talking before the Chase Hooper fight for Borshchev, I'd pick Borshchev, but we've seen what Chase Hooper is able to do to him. His takedown defense is absolutely so bad. Even through working with Uriah Hall and really focusing on the wrestling, Viacheslav still doesn't have the skill set to defend a takedown in the UFC. We have James Llontop. He did lose via submission in the first round by Chris Padilla, which doesn't really, it's pretty bad. But Vladislav is not going for a takedown. He is pure striker, and even when he gets onto the feet, he doesn't really have the most smartest defense. Because of the damage that Vladislav takes in nearly most of his fights, I would have to go with James Llontop. He is the younger fighter. He is more aggressive in his fight style, and even though he's lost to Chris Padilla, I still think that isn't as bad as losing 4 times in a row because you get taken down. Vladislav does not know how to, you know, tackle adversity mid-fight. He has to stick to one game plan and one game plan only. Look, overall, how his career is going, he is 7-4, and he doesn't really have that much time left. He's 32 years old, and he has 10 to 11 fights. Doesn't really say much. He hasn't learned to defend a takedown, and even though James Llontop isn't going to go for a takedown, I think his game plan will be more smart. His tenacity and his training style will be much more smarter, and his ability to adapt in the fight will be much better than Vladislav. And look, if I'm James, even though I'm not a wrestler, the lack of takedown defense from Borshchev will turn an amateur wrestler into a pro wrestler. Like, that's just how it is. We've seen time and time again that Borshchev, as I said, struggles with the takedowns. No matter who tries to take him down, nearly almost gets a takedown. So, Vladislav does have good striking. I am going to give him that. He does have good striking, but offensively, when it comes to being defensive, Vladislav throws it out the window. So he's a bit reckless, and because of that recklessness, I'm going with James Llontop in this one. All right, guys. Next, we have Zachary Reese versus Jose Chicho Medina. This is a very similar fight to the previous fight that I broke down, where wrestler versus striker. Zachary Reese, he's a well-rounded fighter. He has won by knockout against Julian Marquez, but has a glass chin. But his main background and main style is wrestling and jiu-jitsu. He is known to be able to control his opponents on the ground with his pressure wrestling. His past performances, obviously, he's won by submission, particularly in the early rounds, and his losses is when he struggled to get his opponent down, or when his opponent reverses him. His only loss is to Cody Brundage, and I'm just going to play that clip for you right now. He went to go snatch up a triangle choke, and it was in deep. Somehow, Cody Brundage managed to get a slam KO and finished him off with a few punches at the end. It was a complete fluke, because, fuck Cody Brundage, he's a piece of shit, but whatever. Look, Zachary Reese, really, really good wrestling. The complete opposite for Jose Medina, where he's struggled against wrestlers, and he's actually coming off a loss from the Dana White Contender Series against the Russian wrestler, but he still managed to get the contract at the end, so it was pretty good. Jose Medina is 11-3, and most of his losses have been because his opponents are able to take him to the ground. He has a kickboxing Muay Thai background, but he does struggle to, especially with the pressure. As soon as his opponents put pressure on him, I feel that he starts to crumble and he starts to panic a little bit. And that's when these wrestlers and grapplers are able to get him to the ground. So Jose Medina, if he's able to keep it on the feet, I see him winning. But Zachary Reese, his physique and his power is so strong. You have Jose Medina losing to guys that are 9-8, which isn't really good. But yeah, look, he's losing by decision, split decision. Like, that's how he's losing. I think that Zachary Reese will be able to impose his will on Jose whenever he wants, and I think that we see this ending by submission. Next up, guys, we have Denis Buzukja versus Francis Marshall. Denis is 12-4 and Francis is 7-2. First, let's talk about Francis Marshall. Isaac Dolgarian destroyed him in a round, and Isaac Dolgarian's a pretty good fighter, but then before that, Francis lost against William Gomet, and in that fight, nothing really happened. So, I'm looking at Francis Marshall, and at that time, he was undefeated. You're an undefeated prospect. You want to make your mark in the UFC, and you basically shut the bed. You have William Gomet, who just put the jab on him, and there was nothing really exciting in that fight. Then you have Isaac Dolgarian that knocks you out in round 1, so nothing really to say there. What I do know about Francis Marshall, though, is that he does have power in his hands, and he has a really, really strong wrestling background. So what I see is, when you have a fighter like Dennis Buzukja, for example, where he is really good with the jiu-jitsu and he also is good with wrestling. What the difference point is that Francis Marshall will be using more ground and pound to negate the submission threat of Dennis Buzukja. But then we have on the other hand where Dennis Buzukja trains with really, really high level guys with Aljo, with Marab, and these guys are in the top of their divisions. Aljamain Sterling is now a contender within the featherweight division as well. So I believe that because Dennis Buzukja is training with all these high level guys compared to Francis Marshall, where his gym is built around him, we're going to see better training partners with Dennis Buzukja. We're going to see a more advanced training style, I believe. Iron sharpens iron, and you have two killers within that gym alone with Dennis Buzukja. So overall, the training partners, even the style, I think Dennis Buzukja has a better chance. Buzukja has the far more technical striking, and I think that he's going to use that striking to keep Francis at bay. And I also do believe that when there is an opening, I think Buzukja is going to go for the takedown to mix it up, to open up his striking even more. Ultimately, I have Buzukja winning. Next, guys, on the card, we have Gerald Meerschaert, who is 36-17, versus Edmen Shahbazyan, who is 13-4. Let's talk about Gerald Meerschaert, though, because this guy, he's a crafty vet with meaty hooks. He is a veteran in the sport, much, much older. He's 36. He's taken a lot of damage within his career. He is predominantly a grappler that always aims for the submission. A few of his most recent wins are Brian Barberena, who's built like a bag of milk. In 2023, he won against Andre Petrosky and then lost against Joe Pyfer. But Petrosky can be knocked out by a hip. Moving on. In 2022, he won against Bruno Silva, back when Bruno Silva was actually good, and then lost against Krzysztof Jotko via a decision. I like Gerald Meerschaert because his ability to get the fight on the ground, his quick ability to snatch up a submission is very, very good for his age. But I highlight for his age, though, because he is very, very old for his division. In 2021, though, he went on like a 3-fight win streak when he won all by submission against Bartosz Fabinski, Makhmud Miradov, and Dustin Stoltzfus. Now, these fighters are pretty elite. Not really Dustin Stoltzfus really leaves himself open to big shots and being able to be submitted. But Gerald Meerschaert is very good. But you compare him to a guy like Edmen Shahbazyan, where Edmen Shahbazyan has a really good judo and Brazilian jiu-jitsu background, and he's only improving in his striking day by day. I think he is more quicker. He hasn't taken as much damage. And so if it does get gritty, I believe that Edmen Shahbazyan will be able to be the one that weathers through the storm compared to Gerald Meerschaert. He's taken so much damage. I don't believe that he's able to push through those hard exchanges. If he gets on the ground in the first round when they're dry, potentially he has a chance to win. But ultimately, I'm going with Edmen Shahbazyan because he's taken less damage. He is better on the feet, and he's much more younger and more explosive. Oh, man, this is something that is this is the lock of the night. Neil Magny, 29-12, versus Michael Morales, who is 16-0. Neil Magny does not have what it takes anymore. He is 29-12. He does not check leg kicks. He has that old school style of fighting. He's actually coming off a win, surprisingly, versus Mike Malott, which is pretty embarrassing. Mike Malott, he's not really the most technical guy. His fight IQ is very low. But before that, he lost against Ian Gary, and that was by decision. A lot of the leg kicks landed. He won against Philip Rowe, but that's not really saying much. He then lost against Gilbert Burns by submission. He has been in the UFC since 2013, so the miles on this guy have added up completely. Neil Magny does definitely like to pressure up and just drag his opponents to the fence and keep him there. His offense is, as he's getting older, his offense isn't as active. He does have an 80-inch reach, which is pretty big for the welterweight division. And so you'd think a fighter with Magny's stature would be a really high-level striker, but he really isn't. I'm not sure if it's because he's aged or he's been knocked out quite a few times. He gets a bit shy with his striking. But, then we come into a guy like Michael Morales, who's 16-0, has really, really strong kickboxing, Muay Thai skills, can work the elbows, can work the kicks. He's 25 years old and he's coming off a decision win against Max Griffin, which isn't really good, but his next fight after that was against Jake Matthews and he did win it by decision. So he has, as he's gone into his UFC career, he's fighting more higher level competition. This, I believe, is a step down from Jake Matthews, but look, this guy is a gamer. He has a 79-inch reach, so the lanky style of Magny won't necessarily work that well. Marco Morales, he is very aggressive. He will throw the leg kicks. He will mix it up. I believe this is a very, very dominant performance by Marco Morales, and I think we get this done by knockout. Next, guys, we have Marion Santos, who is 14-1, and Australia's own Kaan Ofli, who is 12-1. Man, us in Australia, we have been waiting for this guy to get into the UFC. He's been making a name for himself on the Hex Fight Series. He is their featherweight champion, and now he's making his UFC debut, as well as Marion Santos, I believe. Now, let's talk about Marion Santos first, though. His losses were in Submission Circus, which is a grappling organization. But in terms of MMA, his most recent loss, or his only loss, was in February 2022, where it was ground and pound in round 3. So he's Brazilian, so he's born with a black belt basically. But the thing is, how I'm looking at this, even though that Kaan is a striker, he has really, really good submissions. I believe 5 of his wins come by submission. If Ofli can take it down to the ground, and we see these Brazilian jiu-jitsu guys like to lay on their back and, play jiu-jitsu, it doesn't work in MMA. You have a wrestler or even a well-rounded MMA fighter that's able to really put their pressure on top of you and land ground and pound. It's a tough night in the office for anyone, right? You have Kaan Ofli, who's coming out of Hex, which is Australia's second largest MMA organization behind Eternal MMA. His record is 11-2 with 1 no contest. He has 4 decision wins, 5 submission wins, and 2 wins coming by knockout/TKO, and his only 2 losses are via decision, where they were actually pretty close fights. Now, his opponents, their records, I'm just reading off the screen right now. His last opponent was Jarrett Wilbraham, which he won that fight via rear naked choke in round 3. Before that, it was against a fighter named Ernie Braca, who was 4-4. He won by submission, which was a guillotine. He's had a few cancelled bouts. Australia's very notorious for trying to find fights as you're working your way up into the regional scene. That's why we have guys like Jacob Malkoon getting an early shot within the UFC, because it is hard to get fights at times. But look, in terms of the well-roundedness, I think that, and no bias whatsoever, I think Kaan Ofli is as well of a grappler as he is a striker, where I think Marion Santos is very, very good at striking, but I believe that once he can get taken down, it sort of gets thrown out the window a little bit. I do have Kaan Ofli winning this, but I think it's going to be razor close. Both guys are making their UFC debut. Both guys want to impress, but I am going to go with Kaan Ofli. Next, guys, we have Robert Valentin coming from Tough, 11-3 with 1 no contest. And then we have Ryan Loder, who's 7-1. Man, this fight is on paper, Ryan Loder should win this fight, but he has a really, really strong wrestling background, but he doesn't have that tenacity for the finish, I feel like, compared to Robert Valentin. Robert Valentin is, I just watched his interview with MMA Junkie, and I quote, "I am a man on a mission." He is hungry for this win. He is more ferocious. He is more tenacious. I think he's much more aggressive in his fight style, and does that get him caught into a double leg? I'm not really sure, but, I think Ryan Loder has to be perfect for 15 minutes, whereas Robert Valentin just has to have 10 seconds. And I'm taking that over having to be perfect over 15 minutes in Ryan Loder. Ryan Loder is 7-1. He's 33 years old. He's going up against really low-level competition. I mean, the only good win, I guess, is Leon Shahbazyan. And no, that guy is not Edmen Shahbazyan's brother. But then he lost to an opponent named Troy Green, who was 5-1 at the time, and that was in Uriah Faber's A1 combat. Yeah, look, I just think in terms of the level of competition that they've been facing, the level of experience, I am gonna have to lean in to Robert Valentin. Robert Valentin is 11-3 with one no contest. He has more experience. He is more aggressive with his fight style, and I don't think that he's gonna let a few takedowns stop him. Also, his cardio. I think we're gonna be able to see that his cardio works out more within this fight, and I think we get a TKO finish from Robert Valentin. On to the next one, guys. Angela Hill, who's 17-13, versus Tabatha Ricci, who's 10-2. A lot of people are picking Tabatha Ricci, but I'm not really impressed by her performances. A lot of Angela Hill's decision losses should have been wins. We have Tabatha Ricci, has the most annoying fucking nickname, Baby Shark. She's been in the UFC since 2021, and since then she has gotten knocked out by Manon Fiorot. Has won against Marina Oliveira, which is, pretty shit fighter. Has won against Poliana Viana, won against Jessica Pena, who, very low level competition we're talking about. Has won against Gillian Robertson, who has no striking, who's lost against Lupi Godinez. Lupi's one of my favorite fighters. And then has a decision win over Tanisha Pennington. Like, I don't think the level of competition is high, and Tanisha Pennington was landing on Tabatha all day. I actually think that Tanisha should have won that fight, but the level of competition, the ability, and the pure, when we're talking about pure skill set, I just think Tabatha Ricci isn't all that. Like, yes, she's younger, but that doesn't mean that she'll win. You have Angela Hill, who is crafty, who doesn't get taken down that much. She has a 163 centimeter reach, which is longer than Tabatha Ricci. She's been in the UFC for quite some time, and she has really good submission ability. I think she'll be able to push on the pace, be able to take down Tabatha Ricci, and do whatever she wants. I'm actually going with Angela Hill, and I think the odds for this fight should be that Angela Hill is the favorite. She has more experience. She's been in there with the tougher competition. Tabatha Ricci has been in there with old women, and even when she's been in there with old women, she's been knocked out. She's lost. Like, I don't understand what the odds makers are doing with this fight, but like, Tabatha Ricci is so overrated. And just because Angela Hill is older, they're counting her out. But guys, mark my words, Angela Hill by decision. All right, guys, now for your main event of this event, we have Jared Cannonier, who's 17-7, versus Caio Borralho from the Fighting Nerds. Man, I think it's a quick turnaround for Jared Cannonier. Now, I know that he didn't get cleanly flatline KO'd in his last fight, but Nasruddin Imavov in that last round was freaking pumping him and rocked him multiple times. If the ref didn't stop it, one more shot, he would have been out cold. You have a guy like Caio Borralho, who is the new up-and-comer in the division. Jared Cannonier, he has taken more damage. He has versed killers. Caio Borralho, because he's much younger in his career, hasn't taken that much damage. His pressure, his striking, his jiu-jitsu is so good. And especially the camp that he comes from, the Fighting Nerds, are much higher level. There is a 9-year difference, and I said just right before that age doesn't matter, but when we're talking about men's MMA, it's a bit different to women's MMA. Jared Cannonier is coming off a loss against Nasruddin Imavov, which was in the 4th round. Before that, he won against Marvin Vettori in a pretty dominant decision. In 2022, he edged out a split decision against Sean Strickland and then lost against Israel Adesanya. The issue I have with Jared Cannonier, and we did see in the Marvin Vettori fight, which was a good thing, was he was able to put on the pressure, put on a pace. But sometimes he veers off that. Like, he'll go good, but then he'll stop all of a sudden. Like, he doesn't capitalize on his performance. We have Caio Borralho, where I just think he's going to be just a bullet out of a gun. Like, he's just going to go on him, and he's going to pick him apart. I just think that this will be a dominant victory for Caio Borralho, and if that doesn't happen, then, is what it is. But Borralho is young, he's hungry, he's an up-and-comer. He is looking to get into the top 5, and that's his ticket, Jared Cannonier. he has such good grappling, wrestling, striking, where Jared Cannonier, he's more viewed as a striker. I think Kaio, his, like, how we say with wrestlers, the threat of the takedown makes them effective strikers. Very similar thing to this. I think the fighting nerds and the camp that Kaio comes out of is really, really smart to, and really breaks down their opponents before they get into a fight. Jared Cannonier does come from a good camp and he is looking to expand his skill set, but at 40 years old, there's not, you can't really teach a bull new tricks, or you can't really teach an old dog new tricks. Caio Borralho, I think, gets this done via decision. And just to recap, he only has one loss, so he's 16-1 with one no contest. His striking is much better. His grappling is better. Jared Cannonier does have the power, but at 40, you do start to slow down. And so I think the speed, the aggressiveness, and the overall game plan will be much stronger from Borralho's side. And that is the reason why I'm picking Caio Borralho. Guys, thank you so much for listening and tuning into the MMA Exchange. I will put in the description a link to my TikTok where I do post other content as well. Guys, thank you for subscribing. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to help my videos be pushed into the algorithm. Stay tuned for the next one.